So in the final Union Cross update, we learned a lot about the Master of Masters' plan concerning darkness. We learned that not only are there 13 darknesses like we had already put together, but there are actually 7 deadly darknesses that are likely the strongest 7 of the 13. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm getting real Demon Slayer vibes here. And when it comes to dealing with the 7 deadly darknesses, the Master already has a plan to deal with them, and it comes in the form of himself, Luxu, and the other Foretellers, which in itself is, like I've said before, really messed up when you think about it. These people the Master of Masters raised to be Keyblade Masters were essentially only scapegoats to help him in his ultimate goal, defeating the darkness. He even realizes what he's doing is wrong when he tells Luxu to not let emotions cloud his goal. And I made a whole separate video on what that says about the Master of Masters and how that gave us a deeper look into his character. But today I want to focus on the other side of that revelation and talk about how the Foretellers could end up reacting to it. Because I think there's a possibility that something huge could happen that I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about. But before we get into that, make sure to like and subscribe, and with that being said, let's dive right in. Also, I have a Patreon, so do with that information what you will. So when it comes to the Foretellers, I genuinely think we might see some conflict between them and the Master of Masters in future games. Maybe some small scale arguments, or maybe a full out battle between Master and students, I don't really know. But I was thinking about it a while back when I made a video on the Master of Masters' true intentions, and I decided that I'll probably put this in a video by itself. Because when the Master tells Luxu about his grand plan concerning darkness and all of them, he understandably seems pretty upset. He doesn't even try to hide his displeasure behind that cool and collected exterior that we see him adopt later when he becomes Xigbar. He even goes as far as saying, "I won't let you do that, we can't sacrifice this much." His conviction to go against the Master of Masters is pretty clearly there. I don't think anyone's arguing that. He honestly seems to be shocked that the Master of Masters would even consider sacrificing himself and his students to defeat the darkness to begin with. And I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility to think that the Foretellers would have a similar reaction, or maybe even more of a negative one in the case of some of them. Because I don't exactly know how devout a follower Luxu is when it comes to the Master, but we get a look into that when it comes to the Foretellers. Because in back cover, the Master left them with some pretty vague instructions, and now we know why. But what we also got from back cover is how the Foretellers actually reacted to those instructions, or I guess in some cases lack thereof. Once left to their own devices, we really got to see what happens when they don't have the Master around to guide them, and essentially they started kind of going off and doing their own thing, either not sticking to the Master's instruction or in some ways interpreting them to fit their meanings, and we see this happen multiple times. Ased ended up forming an alliance with Gula when the darkness seemed to be getting stronger, and everyone ended up taking place in the Keyblade War. And during the Keyblade War, we see Ased conveniently interpret the Master's instructions to fit his own needs and his own goals. His goal is to help Ira become a good leader and support him, but we see him ready and willing to kill Ira and insert himself as the new leader. Now, whether or not that was the influence of darkness itself, who's to really say? But the reason I bring this up is, again, because when we see the Foretellers left to their own devices, they're not beings who follow the Master of Masters' instructions perfectly. They are very much their own people who have their own thoughts and emotions that ultimately lead to them derailing from the Master's instructions. And in the future, when the Master of Masters tells them about his ultimate plan, I feel like they wouldn't take that sitting down. Being raised as Keyblade builders who ultimately do what they do to stop the darkness, I can imagine being told to let darkness take control of you and trap it inside yourself would be met with some backlash by the Foretellers. Maybe some of them like Envy and Ira would go for it since they seem to be the ones who really take the Master's teachings to heart. Maybe they're the ones who try to rationalize it and ultimately end up seeing it exactly as the Master of Masters sees it. It's hard to say really what Gula would end up doing, but Ased and obviously Ava are the ones who wouldn't take that sitting down. And I came up with this concept because when Luxu told Ava about the Master's plan, assuming this is what he told her, she ended up getting visibly upset, even to the point of lashing out against Luxu. But in back cover, she was one of the Foretellers who legitimately tried to obey the Master's teachings. And if Luxu told Ava the plan that we learned of in back cover's finale and she reacted like that, it wouldn't surprise me if some of the Foretellers had the same reaction with either Master of Masters or Luxu, who ends up telling them the ultimate plan. Now, whether or not this will actually happen, I don't really know, but I would not be surprised if this did, because I think having something like this happen could honestly end up feeding 2 birds with 1 stone. If some of the Foretellers do end up going as far as going against the Master of Masters' plan and end up fighting either Luxu or the Master of Masters, it would give an opportunity to see just how strong the 2 groups could actually be. Because at this point, seeing the Master of Masters pop up in different timelines and different realities kind of gives him this larger than life presence, even more so than Xehanort, who we know seemed to have contingency plans for his contingency plans. And having the Master of Masters essentially having to fight some of his students would give us a peek into what he can actually do as far as combat goes. Maybe it could be one of those boss fights where you're actually not supposed to win or something like that, so you can really get a feel for what the Master can actually do. And honestly, if that doesn't happen, I, again, would still be okay with it. If Square wants to drive the mystery of the Master of Masters home until we actually have to go against them, that's fine with me. But if that day is coming soon, I feel like that would be a good way to not only give us a look into the Master of Masters, but also the Foretellers as well. Having them go against the Master that they've basically been serving for their whole lives, or in some cases maybe not going against them, would be an interesting look into them as characters as well. Because we've seen bits and pieces of their personalities through back cover and Key and Union Cross, but I think finding out where they draw the line when it comes to the one person that they all trust would be interesting to take a look into as we go into the future of the series. And again, I'd be fine if this doesn't happen, who knows, I could really be talking out of my ass right now. But I do think that this could legitimately be possible as we go into Phase 2. But hey, what do you guys think? Do you think we could see some of the Foretellers end up fighting the Master of Masters, or do you think something else could happen? Let me know down below. But that's gonna be all from me today, so this is Moose Wayne, signing off.